Juice Box, episode 7, November edition. We're just gonna go right into it. Progress update on the next video. We are now in the editing stage. And I'm sure everyone will be happy to hear this, but there is officially at least 41 minutes of the entire video totally completed.
Nice.
That's right. I'm at the 41 minute mark. And this has surprisingly been going pretty well, at least for editing. Voice recording is always the worst part because the stuttering, but editing has been going well, and it helps that most of the stuff that you see on screen, or I guess for the whole video really, is like, statistics and quotes and abstract images. So, I think I underestimated how easy editing was going to be, but voice recording, oh god, no, that always sucks. And I was editing today, and I have ran out of voice recording to edit the video to. So right now, the next step for me is to continue voice recording. I do it like a couple pages at a time, and then I edit it, and then do more voice recording, and then edit what I recorded. That's my process. For one, there's no way to record all of that at once. But also, my voice just gets worn out after a while. And I can feel like throat muscles, they feel weird, and I worry. I don't know how often you guys can pick up on this, but occasionally in the videos there'll be a moment where my voice just kind of shifts in tone or pitch, and I try my best to keep it flowing the level that I talk, but sometimes I record my voice maybe like 2 weeks later or something, and then when I edit it together, there's just a noticeable shift in pitch. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but so to avoid that, I think what's just happening is that after you talk for a certain amount of time, your voice kind of shifts into a different gear, and then it stays pretty much consistent for the entire rest of the time. So when I get into the voice recording, I just have to start screaming or say some of the lines half-heartedly, and then like my voice finally kind of gets into the right gear, and then I continue on. But whatever. That's the next thing I have to do right now, is do some more voice recording, which I'll probably do tomorrow. That's right. I will be moving here at the end of the month, which is another reason to halt production on the next video. So it's gonna be fun times coming up. As always, sorry for the delays, and I appreciate the patience. But I guess that'll do it for the November update. If you're a patron, hopefully you enjoyed the latest sneak peek. Yeah, anyway, we got 41 minutes of the next video. I'm hoping to get a lot more done this month, or for the remainder of this month, with what was it? Actually, no, it's already November by the time this podcast comes out. Whatever. So now on to the meat of the podcast. I have to touch on the Ukraine stuff now that I mentioned it last podcast, and I think at this point I'm committed to seeing this story through, at least for the podcast. I have no intention of making a video on this. And speaking of last podcast, it's like people legitimately listen to nothing I say. I can't tell you how many comments and personal messages I've gotten from people, just needlessly triggered Trumpists, telling me, "Hey, you explained to me how Biden's son was able to be put in charge of the Ukrainian oil company, you fucker! Running for president doesn't make you immune to the law." And I'm like, did I not say that in the podcast? Did I also not say that the whole Biden side of the story deserved to be investigated? Also, did I not tell you to leave the video and to enjoy the rest of your Halloween? It's like, they're not even triggered by the context of anything I said. I honestly can't believe that they listened through the entirety of the podcast, for one, because there's so many people saying, I'm sick of this shit, political juice. But, I started off with the Biden stuff. I said all of that. and these people are still triggered. So it's like they heard a word or something before any of that, and like they heard the word neocon, and then they got their tribiness going, and then their immediate response was to defend our supreme leader. It's very creepy stuff. It's creepy stuff. I already laid out the evidence for both sides, and I already said it's bad for both sides, and yet all we've heard about for the entirety of October and pretty much September was just more information on the Trump side of things, which really doesn't help him at all. So to keep you all informed, let's go through the timeline of events from the last podcast, so pretty much all of October. So first, we had the awesome press briefing by Mick Mulvaney, director of the Office of Management and Budget, who comes out on October 17th and literally acknowledges that a quid pro quo took place with regards to the aid money and the Ukrainians investigating the DNC.
And that's why we held up the money. Now, there was a report...
So the demand for an investigation into the Democrats was part of the reason that he ordered to withhold funding to Ukraine.
The look back to what happened in 2016 certainly was part of the thing that he was worried about in corruption with that nation. And that is absolutely appropriate.
Withholding the funding.
Yeah. Of the issue.
But to be clear, what you just described is a quid pro quo. It is funding will not flow unless the investigation into the Democratic server happened as well.
We do that all the time with foreign policy. And I have news for everybody. Get over it. There's going to be political influence in foreign policy. I'm talking to Mr. Carl.
Which, if you recall from the last podcast, investigating the DNC, and specifically, if we're basing it off of the transcript, the activities of CrowdStrike is literally a nut job conspiracy theory. You need to read it. I explained it last podcast, but you got to read it for yourself. That there is no missing server, right? They didn't just physically take the server and then, they're like hiding it in a tunnel somewhere. Whatever. It's just a incredibly stupid, dumb conspiracy theory. But then, 5 hours later, after Mick Mulvaney acknowledges this, he immediately begins to walk back his statement and blame the media and your lying ears. And he tells Chris Wallace on Fox News, "That's not what I said, that's what people said I said. Here's what I said, I'll say it again, and hopefully people will listen this time. There were two reasons that the aid was held up. We talked about this at some length. The first one was the rampant corruption in Ukraine. Ukraine, by the way, Chris, it's so bad in Ukraine that in 2014, Congress passed a law requiring us to make sure that corruption was moving in the right direction. So corruption is a big deal, everyone knows it. The president was also concerned about whether or not other nations, specifically European nations, were helping with foreign aid to the Ukraine as well. We talked about that for quite a while now. I did then mention that in the past, the president had mentioned for me to time about the DNC server. He had mentioned the DNC server to other people publicly. He even mentioned it to President Zelensky in the phone call, but it wasn't connected to the aid, and that's where I think people got sidetracked this weekend at the press conference." Okay, that is literally the reverse of what he did say at his press conference. Remember what he said. Remember what he says here with Chris Wallace. He had mentioned the DNC server to other people publicly, but it wasn't connected to the aid. Flashback.
So the demand for an investigation into the Democrats was part of the reason that he ordered to withhold funding to Ukraine.
The look back to what happened in 2016 certainly was part of the thing that he was worried about in corruption with that nation. And that is absolutely appropriate.
Withholding the funding.
Yeah.
Withholding the funding.
Yeah.
Withholding the funding.
Yeah.
Right there. The demand for Ukraine to look into the DNC was tied to withholding of the funding.
Yeah.
And, I find it weird how Mulvaney also kind of passes off the DNC server conspiracy as just it's just some normal thing, there's no thought process going on that, hey, maybe this CrowdStrike thing actually is really crazy and is like some QAnon crap. But then, so that's him, confusing everyone within a span of 5 hours. But then, literally 24 hours after the press conference, the Trump campaign immediately proceeded to try and make money off of all this by selling shirts that say, "Get over it," which, if you recall, was like the headline of Mulvaney's entire briefing.
Get over it.
Okay, so wait a second. Was this press briefing just the most perfect thing anyone has ever seen, and that everyone should get over the quid pro quo thing? Or is everything he's saying nonsense? But it was still so good that we were going to make money off of exactly what he said, which we later said was bad? Now, the campaign later came out with a statement saying basically, no, this is just like a get over it in general. The slogan represents a call for Washington politicians to put aside political theater and false accusations and get back to work for the people of the United States. And this is what I love, right? Because we've done this like 10 times now in this administration, where something bad happens and everyone says, "Hey, yeah, this was bad." And then Trump and his base come out and say, "That never happened." And then like a few weeks later, we find out that it did happen. And then the argument shifts over to, "Yeah, so what, it happened. It's totally fine and anyone can do it." Or, the other version is like when Trump says something and then everyone is like, "Yeah, this is the absolute truth and it's freaking awesome." And then we find out that it actually isn't true and it's just some, made up statement. And then the response shifts to, "Oh yeah? Well, who the hell cares? Because you people suck anyways." And this is because everything is stupid now and things are either the best thing in the world, golden plated and epic, or, they're just like the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of the globe. There's no nuance because it's easier for your brain, especially in these tribal times, to just go to one of the two extremes. But in this situation, we've gone back and forth like 3 times now, where the original claim was, these claims by the whistleblower are deep state crap. There was no quid pro quo. And then the Trump administration releases the transcript because for some bizarre reason they thought that it would help them. And then we find out, hey, yeah, there is a blatant quid pro quo in there. And then the response is, there is no quid pro quo in there. Did you even read the transcript? And then Mick Mulvaney comes out and admits to a quid pro quo and tells everyone to get over it. And then for like at least 2 hours or so, the news line was like, hell yeah, it was a quid pro quo and get over it. And then Trump comes out and, Sean Hannity, and they both say, no, this wasn't a quid pro quo and Mulvaney is dumb.
Draining the swamp. One corrupt politician at a time. This is the Sean Hannity Show.
I just think half of these people, Republicans too, what is Mulvaney even talking about? I just think he's dumb. I really do. I don't even think he knows what he's talking about. That's my take on it.
Tasting the juice, one bottle at a time. The Juice Box Podcast.
Yeah, I hate that kind of crap. This is the kind of talk radio character that the Perception Gap survey that I mentioned a couple of podcasts ago, the survey mentions as making you think about things incorrectly. You're not getting a very realistic picture of actual news listening to talk radio. And then the best part, or I guess the worst, is this new defense, a defense against impeachment, which came from Matt Whitaker himself, where he says, abuse of power is not a crime.
Abuse of power is not a crime. Let's fundamentally boil it down to, the Constitution is very clear that this has to be some pretty egregious behavior, and they cannot tell the American people what this case is even about right now, because they have to do it in secret.
Matt Whitaker also does not understand what impeachment is, which we already talked about that in episodes 4 and 5. Impeachable offenses do not need to be literal crimes. Abuse of power is absolutely an impeachable offense. This guy used to be our attorney general. Because abuse of power isn't exactly a crime, that's precisely the reason why we have an impeachment process, in our Constitution. So, who knows? Now we might start seeing T-shirts saying, abuse of power is not a crime in the future. You never know now. But honestly, the real crime here is that the Trump campaign is trying to sell their shirts for $30. This is not $30 material. Okay, so, and then later, we get the transcript of the opening testimony from William Taylor, who, if you recall from the last podcast, and I think it was my final interruption for that podcast, that he had been sending texts back and forth with our ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, and as we found out, I think it's, he said, I think it's crazy to withhold security assistance for help with a political campaign, which it just put more fuel on the fire of Trump's side of the Ukraine thing. But he gave his testimony to the House impeachment investigators, which it really doesn't help Trump here, but let's read it. Bill Taylor. On September 7th, I had a conversation with Mr. Morrison in which he described a phone conversation earlier that day between Ambassador Sondland and President Trump. Mr. Morrison said that he had a sinking feeling after learning about this conversation from Ambassador Sondland. According to Mr. Morrison, President Trump told Ambassador Sondland that he was not asking for a quid pro quo, but President Trump did insist that President Zelensky go to a microphone and say he is opening investigations of Biden and 2016 election interference, and that President Zelensky should want to do this himself. Mr. Morrison said that he told Ambassador Bolton and the NSC lawyers of this phone call between President Trump and Ambassador Sondland. The following day, on September 8th, Ambassador Sondland and I spoke on the phone. He said he had talked to President Trump as I suggested a week earlier, but that President Trump was adamant that President Zelensky himself had to, quote, clear things up and do it in public. President Trump said it was not a quid pro quo. Ambassador Sondland said that he had talked to President Zelensky and Mr. Yermak and told them that, although this was not a quid pro quo, if President Zelensky did not clear things up in public, we would be at a stalemate. I understood a stalemate to mean that Ukraine would not receive the much-needed military assistance. Ambassador Sondland said this conversation concluded with President Zelensky agreeing to make a public statement in an interview with CNN. Okay, this is by definition a quid pro quo. If President Zelensky did not clear things up, Ukraine would not receive the much-needed military assistance. By definition, a quid pro quo. Which I read the freaking transcript in the last podcast. I already pointed out that it exists. It's existed for over a month now. The quid pro quo is in there. And Bill Taylor is adding on some more corroboration to everything we knew from the original whistleblower's account. That's another thing I kept getting last time, where people have the belief that because Adam Schiff, one of the most incompetent congressmen in existence, decided to read out a parody of the actual transcript, which I don't know what, the guy is utterly incompetent, that therefore both the transcript and the whistleblower's account of anything is totally false. Okay, guys, just because Adam Schiff is an incredibly partisan hack does not mean that the actual transcript itself no longer says what it says, nor does it mean that the whistleblower's account of things aren't true, most of which has already been corroborated. Anyway, Bill Taylor continues. Before these text messages, during our call on September 8th, Ambassador Sondland tried to explain to me that President Trump is a businessman. When a businessman is about to sign a check to someone who owes him something, he said, the businessman asks that person to pay up before signing the check. Ambassador Volker used the same term several days later while we were working together at the Yalta European Strategy Conference. I argued to both that the explanation made no sense. The Ukrainians did not owe President Trump anything, and holding up security assistance for domestic political gain was crazy, as I had said in my text message to Ambassador Sondland and Volker on September 9th. Ambassador Sondland also told me that he now recognized that he had made a mistake by earlier telling the Ukrainian officials to whom he spoke that a White House meeting with President Zelensky was dependent on a public announcement of investigations. In fact, Ambassador Sondland said everything was dependent on such an announcement, including security assistance. And I mean, this also goes in the face of previous reports from Ukraine where they said, we never even knew that the aid was being withheld. Which I mentioned that last time in the previous podcast, and which was always iffy because this is traditionally how this country conducts itself. They lie about things. And I mean, I mentioned a couple of cases where a Ukrainian agent was trying to contact U.S. officials because he had so much damaging information that could help the U.S., and then it turns out that he has nothing, and we never hear from him again. The same thing happened with their new state prosecutor who was trying to contact Bill Barr because he literally, or he apparently had some really serious stuff on Joe Biden, and then he later says, yeah, I'm not doing an investigation. There's nothing. What? Well, it turns out that Ukraine did know about the aid freeze, and by early August, quote, top officials were told in early August about the delay of $391 million in security assistance, undercutting a chief argument President Trump had used to deny any quid pro quo. So this also just cuts away at any threat of honesty that Ukraine may have had in the situation. And I mean, with the timeline of events, there's no possible way that Ukrainian officials are just sitting there for 2 months with no word from the U.S., completely oblivious to everything. When we know that Trump has been wanting them to do these investigations for him and make public that these investigations were to take place. And they're all personal, right? We know that Attorney General Barr was not informed about any of this. And that this was, by far a Rudy Giuliani operation. None of this was, none of this was officially a Justice Department undertaking. It was all Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and his ambassadors to investigate a QAnon conspiracy theory into the DNC server and investigate Joe Biden and his son. And again, that is all fine to be investigated. I'd like to see an investigation into what happened with Burisma. And whether or not, Hunter Biden was getting rich off his father's position. But you've got to be kidding me if you think that this has anything to do with Donald Trump's sincere concern for global corruption. Yeah, he's gonna push for this investigation now, in 2019, when Joe Biden has entered the Democratic race and is still the frontrunner who actually has a shot of beating Trump, and has been leading by an average of like 10 points in almost every poll. No, now, 2 years into my presidency, do I really care about global corruption? And he's not going to do this at all through the official channels. He's going to use his personal lawyer and his goons to figure this all out. And also, we found out, I guess 2 weeks ago, that the Trump administration actually tried to cut back funding for programs that were created specifically to fight corruption, and specifically in Ukraine. According to Salon, quote, the Trump administration has sought to cut the International Narcotics Control and Law Enforcement Program, whose goals include, quote, helping U.S. partners address threats to U.S. interests by building resilience and promoting reform in the justice and law enforcement sectors through support to new institutions and specialized offices, such as Ukraine's National Anti-Corruption Bureau and Special Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. Yeah. He's so concerned about corruption that he was trying to defund efforts to fight corruption in Ukraine. And speaking of corruption, we have to go back to Rudy Giuliani and his boys, 4 of his associates having been arrested. So the first 2 were arrested at Dulles Airport on October 9th for campaign finance charges. Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, both of whom have since pled not guilty, and I think it was Lev Parnas, this might have changed, but the last I heard, he tried to invoke executive privilege with his lawyer with regards to his prosecution, which is just like, I don't know what anyone is thinking about this, but that is not how any of this works. And it's also interesting because it sort of indirectly ties them to Trump in this sense, and the executive, but it's just bizarre. But so in the domestic side of things, they're being charged with having created a shell company called Global Energy Producers, which has no connection to the energy industry, no physical business, or any financing, and they gave political donations to the super PAC American First Action of about $325,000. But on the international side of things, and particularly in Ukraine, things start to reek even more of corruption. So Dale Perry, who owns a U.S. energy company, a legitimate U.S. energy company, which is operating in Ukraine, heard that his business partner had met with Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. And from what he says of the conversation, they wanted to take the Ukrainian energy sector back to the good old days of the Yanukovych's corrupt regime. And they also said that they wanted to work to remove the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. And if you recall, that ambassador was Marie Yanukovych, or Yovanovich, sorry. The ambassador to Ukraine, who was since removed from her position a few months ago because Trump said in the transcript that she was bad news. But it also seems very likely that Trump's perception of this ambassador is coming from Giuliani and his people. Because as Dale Perry wrote, quote, "When 2 or 3 or 4 business people can go out and see to it that a U.S. ambassador is removed from her post when she's doing a fabulous, fantastic, excellent job, there is a serious problem with our form of governance." And if it is true that Giuliani's associates were going to Ukraine to make the energy sector more corrupt, as well as remove the U.S. ambassador in order to go about this business, yeah, that's not good stuff. And the best part of this is Lev Parnas was apparently interviewed in September by NPR, where he specifically says, quote, "This is actually the first couple of times that I really started doing some bigger donations because I wanted to get notoriety for my energy company, and I felt it might be a great way to play with the big boys, as you call it." and then he reveals this bit, quote, "Mayor Giuliani is a very dear friend of mine. Yes. And through his connection with Giuliani, he's had conversations with Don Jr., President Trump. We have photographs of them meeting the Trump family, and their connection with Giuliani has very likely been connected to all of Rudy's activities in Ukraine." As Parnas says, quote, "I just happen to be Ukrainian. I happen to speak the language. I happen to also have a lot of resources in that part of the world." And as an article in NPR notes, quote, "Parnas helped arrange and sat in on meetings between Giuliani and several prominent Ukrainians who promised dirt on Democratic opponents and have since come up in the impeachment inquiry." So they're going to be in trouble for a while. And as always, there will likely be a lot more information coming. Oh, and if you remember from, I think it was either podcast 2 or podcast 3 or maybe both, we get some more war language. This time from our new press secretary, Stephanie Grisham. Quote, "President Trump has done nothing wrong. This is a coordinated smear campaign from far-left lawmakers and radical unelected bureaucrats waging war on the Constitution." And then she goes on to say that, there was no quid pro quo, which is not true. So, I mean, we're done with that. And we also get this article by Rand Paul, which just prevaricates around what the actual problem is. And I don't get the fascination with Rand Paul among libertarians to begin with. Because for one, I don't like idolizing politicians because they will always lie to you and betray their own principles at some point. But also, he's a bit of a douchebag, and he almost always hides behind his libertarian convictions when it's convenient for him. But he'll say screw it when it's not. But anyway, I said last podcast that we do deals with countries all the time. Your country does this, our country does that. Yeah, obviously that happens all the time. What is happening with the Trump situation is not that. It is your country does this so that I can personally benefit from my own political self-interests, and then I'll do that. That is what the problem is. The claim, where this evidence is leading to is that this is all wrapped up in Trump's own personal political self-interests, not for the sake of fighting global corruption or investigating legitimate concerns. Because it still seems like a primary motivator of Trump wanting an investigation to be conducted by Ukraine was to dig into CrowdStrike. Like, this is not serious. You can't be serious about this. And if Giuliani's statement from May of this year is any indicator, he was busy pressuring Ukraine because he thinks that investigation on their part will, quote, be very, very helpful to my client and may turn out to be helpful to my government. The number one important factor in all of this is personal for Donald Trump, and maybe it's good for the government. Yeah, this is not looking good for Trump. Oh, and today, I'm recording this on Wednesday night, we had another testimony from Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who, according to a NBC summary, quote, told House impeachment investigators on Tuesday that a White House meeting between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, as well as a delivery in nearly $400 million in security and military aid, was, quote, contingent on Ukrainian officials carrying out investigations into Burisma, the Bidens, the 2016 election, and CrowdStrike. I mean, you know, come on. I mean, this is kind of pointing in one direction. Everything we have so far is pointing in one direction. And this is, you know, compared to the Russia investigation and Robert Mueller, which I never thought was actually going to turn up anything, just because, you know, those who are much more favorable to the president, their approach to the Russia thing was just that, you know, it was never possible just because, you know, they're kind of a sketchy process on the part of the DOJ, and that it's just, you know, they didn't really see the evidence for it. But, I mean, like, ethically, morally, Trump is absolutely capable of wanting to collude with Russia. We know they wanted to collude with Russia because Donald Jr. or Trump Jr., whatever, one of his sons, you know, once they heard that that a Russian lawyer wanted to come and talk to them because they had dirt on Hillary, Trump's son was emphatic. You know, it's like, if this is what I think it is, I'm coming to this meeting, the famed Trump hotel meeting with the lawyer who ended up talking about, you know, adopting Russian babies or something. Like, you know, and you know, Roger Stone, you know, he wanted to reach out to WikiLeaks. Like, these people, his whole crew, you know, Paul Manafort is in jail. His entire crew is certainly ethically capable of this. My whole point is just, if they were to do that, you know, the evidence would have really been there. It would have been obvious. But the evidence just wasn't there for that because they could not pull that off. They didn't have the resources. But like with all the stuff that we know, they certainly wanted to. And you know, what is the interview with George Stephanopoulos and Trump from a few months ago, with Trump saying, you know, hey, if a foreign nation offers, you know, information on my political opponents, yeah, I'll listen to it. Yeah,
I'll take any motherfucker's money if he giving it away.
You know, his whole crew, extremely sketchy. Roger Stone is a major dirtbag. The Republicans need to distance themselves as far as possible from any of these sketchy douchebags. With this Ukraine stuff, the evidence is pointing in one direction. I mean, I guess we'll find out more in November, but it's not looking good. So, oh yeah, and we are scheduled to have a testimony from former National Security Advisor John Bolton. John Bolton, from what I've heard, the guy knows how administration works. Like he knows he knows how the cogs work, and how much of a mess bureaucracy is. And he is not really on board with a lot of what Trump is about. You know, especially with his you know, foreign policy decisions. I really like the guy. You know, everyone hates him because they're, you know, he's just a warmonger, or like, you know, some ultimate interdimensional demon who has the blueprints to bring about the new world order or something. But I mean, I think the guy is hilarious. I don't really have a problem with him like everyone else does. Like he's kind of like Bill Kristol in this sense. Like everyone hates the guy, And, you know, not without reason. I mean, Bill Kristol's certainly done things that, you know, he should not have done. But he's just such a really interesting dude that I can't help but to just be fascinated, especially on Kristol's background with intellectual history. He's got a thing on YouTube called Conversations with Bill Kristol, and some of the people that he has on that show are the people that he has on the show are more interesting than him. But the way Bill Kristol's an interesting guy, and I think John Bolton, he's like Bill Kristol for me, where they're both like really hated figures in American political life, but I just think I like them. I just think they're interesting. But returning to Ukraine, if the evidence of this past month is any indicator, it is looking more and more likely that this was all an effort on Giuliani's and Trump's part to personally benefit for the sake of his re-election. I mean, I think David French wrote this, but I think he said that this is like Watergate and Bill Clinton's impeachment in reverse, because we already have the blue dress, we already have the tapes. You know, that's what the transcript was. We already know what the intention was for all of this. And now with Bill Taylor's testimony, you know, the fact that they wanted to defund anti-corruption efforts in Ukraine, Giuliani's goons, you know, the recent testimony from Vindman, like, we're just filling in the gap now. But we already have the blue dress. And this is not looking good for Trump. You know, I'm sorry to constantly refer back to some of the comments that I get, but it is really weird and creepy how, you know, in the last podcast, all I did was lay out the evidence, and, you know, I leaned more heavily on the Trump side of things just because there was more information on that side of things. And, you know, I said, hey, this really doesn't look good for Trump. This kind of looks corrupt, and we will surely find out more information in the future. But for some reason, that's just unacceptable. The response isn't, you know, well, you know, the evidence looks bad for Trump, but I still think he didn't do anything bad, or, you know, something along those lines. No, it's, no, there wasn't a quid pro quo, you fucker, and it's like a needless absolute when, I mean, you honestly just needed to read the transcript, and it's kind of obvious that once he starts talking about reciprocity and favors and Burisma and Biden and defense missiles, and there's a deal going on. But, you know, right now I'm leaning even more on the side that Trump's whole angle here was deliberately to benefit personally from having the Ukrainians publicly announce that they were investigating Biden and investigating an incredibly dumb conspiracy theory about the DNC server. That's it with the Ukraine stuff. I guess touching on impeachment, I still just at the end of the day, I just don't think that it's gonna make a whole lot of difference in the Senate. You know, if impeachment does go through the House, it won't go through the Senate. He's not gonna be removed. So I really, you know, I just don't have a whole lot of concerns about that whole angle of the story. But, you know, otherwise, I'm very much looking forward to the investigation into the origins of the Russian investigation by Bill Barr, which is now in its beginning stages, and I believe has turned into a criminal inquiry. I don't know what all that is supposed to entail, a criminal inquiry bit. You know, that might just mean that, you know, they're grabbing, they're dispensing subpoenas or something. I don't know, but I guess we'll be finding out how much corruption, I guess, was present in the Obama DOJ, or at least with the origins of the Russia investigation. So that should be interesting. You know, if that's something I want to see. That's it with all that. And now we move over to foreign policy and the situation with the Kurds. I really hate talking about foreign policy, but this entire situation is just so horrible, and it still doesn't seem like people understand all that happened, that, you know, I have to say some words about this. So leaving Syria is something that's been on Trump's mind for at least since December, when he originally claimed to want to pull out from Syria altogether. This was one of the reasons why General Mattis resigned, because he said, like, what the hell is wrong with this person? And this is also likely part of the reason why John Bolton left a few months ago. So there is no longer any serious person in the National Security Administration in this White House. Now it's just Trump and his own ideas at this point. We have not really heard of any competent guidance going on. So first and foremost, anyone who says that pulling out of Syria has begun the process of ending endless wars has no idea what they are talking about. From the very first day he announced the withdrawal, any serious person knew, no, this is not going to end anything. I mean, for one, the advisors who were withdrawn from their positions in northern Syria, they're not coming home. No one is coming home. All of them have been moved to bases in Iraq or Afghanistan. No one is coming home. They are still in the Middle East. We are still in the Middle East. And we're not going to get out of the Middle East for a very long time. I don't even know where to begin with this. Okay, so for one, there are some new principles which seem to have come out of this for a certain portion of the people who really love the withdraw. So one, alliances don't matter to America. Two, the pursuit of ending endless wars justifies all manners of reckless behavior. And three, human interactions and the relationship between nations is 100% static and unchanging if we remove the single factor of the United States. Like, that incentives don't exist. That people and nations just don't react to things. And that foreign policy just has no has no effects on us. These are the only intelligible principles that I can get out of this from the people who 100% agree with everything that has happened this past month. So for one, no one either seems to know or really appreciate or they just do not care about the extent to which the Kurdish forces in Syria have been the primary force killing ISIS for us. They are on the front lines against the war on terrorism in Syria, so we don't have to be. This is why you make alliances with people, for these very situations. So when you're in situations where you're somewhere in the world where you don't want to be, you can rely on other people to help you with your objectives. No one wants to see dead American soldiers. This is why the Kurds have been extremely useful to us. And now that the only force protecting them from Turks is gone, they have run under the protection of Assad and the Russians. I mean, even for the sake of the future, good luck getting other, nations around the world to want to ally with you when you are in a foreign policy mess in the future. I mean, what do people think an alliance means? You do things for people to gain their trust and support. They will do things for you later on down the line. Being friends with the US, being friends with us is something valuable. Should be something valuable. This just continues to taint the value in allying with us. And especially for the Kurds, who, I mean, they've had a history of being, betrayed by America. As Ken Pollack, he's a foreign policy fellow, I think, at the American Enterprise Institute. He said a few weeks ago, the Turks sent us over 5,000 troops during the Korean War to help us. The Turks, they couldn't care less about the Korean Peninsula, but they recognized the value in an alliance with us at the time and maintaining good relations. The Australians sent us 2,000 troops in the war in Iraq. Iraq isn't some serious concern for Australia, but they did it anyway, and it helped us out in Iraq when we needed it. We needed the Kurds to kill terrorists for us. The Kurds need us so they don't get slaughtered by Turkey. That was the relationship. And in less than 24 hours, Trump just wrecked it. And then, the unbelievable justification of all this is that we're ending endless wars. Nothing is ending. These are lies. And I seriously cannot believe it. I hate this mantra of endless wars, but I mean, just repeatedly saying that over and over again does not change the actual reality of what's happening. I mean, I seriously do not believe that the majority of Americans understand how any of this actually happened. Donald Trump did not consult anyone before doing this. This was entirely an impulsive decision with no regard for his national security advisors or with any other nation that is even remotely involved in the region. Not even Israel was informed. If you're going to leave a region, you can at least have a plan for that. There was no plan here. There was no strategy. Everyone was literally shunned by this completely out of nowhere with order to withdraw. And according to an article by Carol Lee and Courtney Cube at NBC, quote, the White House's announcement of the decision late Sunday night blindsided not just America's Kurdish partners in the fight against the Islamic State militant group, but almost everyone. Senior officials at the Pentagon, the State Department and the White House, lawmakers on Capitol Hill, and US allies in Europe and the Middle East. No one was told about any of this. And as Jonah Goldberg writes in the LA Times, this might be the first time in American history where the President of the United States is singularly responsible for this foreign policy disaster. Singularly. I think he said in the article, George Bush at least had the support of Congress and the intelligence community before Iraq. The Gulf of Tonkin resolution had the support of the entire House and all but 2 members of the Senate. This might just be one of the more reckless foreign policy decisions ever made by a single person. How could you support this decision? How in the world do you not at least contact your national security advisors, the Pentagon, Congress, our allies? And according to one senior US official, according to the phone conversation that Trump had with Erdogan that greenlit, Turkey's near ethnic cleansing operation, quote, Trump told Erdogan that a moderate incursion, such as clearing out a safe zone, would be acceptable, officials said. But he said a large invasion that leads to major combat operations would be unacceptable. If Turkey did launch a large military operation, Trump warned Erdogan, the US would completely withdraw from Syria, according to one senior US official. What? If you launch a small investigation into Kurdish lands, that's great. But if you launch a bigger one, we're going to completely leave the area? Is this what is this what America First looks like now? Is this seriously a projection of American strength? Who in the world thinks this looks strong on our part? And according to Jennifer Griffin at Fox, Trump, quote, went off script from what his national security team gave him as talking points for his phone conversation with the Turkish president. Shock continues to reverberate through the US military that the White House has essentially greenlighted this Turkish operation during that conversation, she continued. As one senior military source put it to me, a lot of people will die. And that's the thing, right? The same people saying that they're sick of all the dead people and want no more wars, well, you've got yourself thousands of more dead people now and another Middle Eastern war brewing. Or then they'll say, no, you misunderstand. I don't give a crap about Kurds, only our armed forces. Well, you know who our armed forces give a crap about? The people they've been fighting with for years now. The people who have spent 11,000 of their own forces to die on our behalf to fight ISIS. And, because it seems like the point needs to be reiterated, ISIS wants to come here to kill us. One former troop said, it feels like we're abandoning our closest ally in the fight against ISIS. We're abandoning them to a fate that is going to end very poorly for them. At least 8 US service members who served with Kurdish forces in Syria and Iraq expressed disgust in interviews with the Washington Post about the rapid US changes and the lack of a clear plan to prevent a crisis. Another Army officer said, I can't even look at the atrocities after videos were uploaded showing Kurdish civilians being slaughtered by Turkish militias. The ISIS mission is going to stop. ISIS is going to have a resurgence, and we're going to have to go back in 5 years and do it all over again. The same officer said that while he was in the Middle East, military officials at the Pentagon sometimes discussed with officers in the field how they could craft a compelling case for Trump to stay longer while a thoughtful exit strategy could be designed. Folks are heartbroken, a second officer said. It's very different than if we had said, we are getting out of Syria in 6 months. A reasonable man definition says that we facilitated that attack. If someone had presented Trump with a 6-month withdrawal plan and actually stuck to it, we wouldn't be having these conversations. So, I mean, you cannot tell me this was in any way a good way to go about leaving. And this doesn't even begin to cover the insane letter Trump sent to Erdogan on October 9th, which is unbelievably embarrassing. Here's what he said. His Excellency Erdogan, let's work out a good deal. You don't want to be responsible for slaughtering thousands of people. And I don't want to be responsible for destroying the Turkish economy. And I will. I've already given you a little sample with respect to Pastor Brunson. I have worked hard to solve some of your problems. Don't let the world down. You can make a great deal. General Muslim is willing to negotiate with you, and he is willing to make concessions that they would never have made in the past. I am confidentially enclosing a copy of his letter to me, just received. History will look upon you favorably if you get this done the right and humane way. It will look upon you forever as the devil if good things don't happen. Don't be a tough guy. Don't be a fool. I will call you later. This is an actual letter written by the President of the United States. And you know what happened? According to Turkish presidential sources, quote, President Erdogan received the letter, thoroughly rejected it, and put it in the bin. He threw the letter in the trash and proceeded to commence his operation, which could still very well lead to some sort of ethnic cleansing of the Kurds. And the Turks have been so adamant on invading Kurdish territory, and they absolutely do not care about American presence in the area, that they were just short of bombing our own bases. According to NPR, the Turkish forces violated a standing agreement with the US to not get close enough to threaten US troops on the ground. US forces responded with a show of force using aircraft to demonstrate the forces were prepared to defend themselves, as well as communication with the Turkish military through official channels to protect the risk to US forces. This would never have happened if we actually had a competent president. And moreover, because the Turks did not stop their advance, and because this impulsive decision by President Trump to just immediately withdraw out of nowhere came as such a shock to our soldiers in Syria, they have literally had to abandon their bases and leave behind their personal possessions so that they could fall into the hands of Russians. As Newsweek writes, the small number of Americans appear to have been caught by surprise by the quick retreat. The Anna news video showed food and drink left out on tables and fridges full of supplies. Among the more recognizable brands were cans of Coca-Cola, plus boxes of Kellogg's cereal and Krispy Kreme donuts. The Anna news video also showed abandoned sleeping quarters, internet access points, and exercise areas. The correspondent noted that some personal belongings had been left behind by the withdrawing troops, illustrating the speed at which they had to leave.
Всем доброе утро из Мэнбиджа. Я нахожусь на американской базе, на которой еще вчера утром были они. А сегодня утром уже мы. Ну, сейчас посмотрим, как они жили, чем занимались, ну и что это такое, и с чем это едят.
That man said, "Good morning. We are at the US base in Manbij. Only yesterday morning were they still here, and today we are here. Let's have a look at how they lived here, what they did, and what it is all about." And since this shit show precipitated, we have now begun to bomb our own bases so that they don't fall into the hands of Russians. You cannot tell me that any of this is smart or desirable. You cannot tell me that this is the way to conduct foreign policy, without any plans whatsoever, without consulting anyone or our own State Department, by directly going against everything our national security advisors has ever said, and completely blindsiding our own soldiers on the ground and our allies in the region. You can't possibly tell me that this is the proper way to conduct foreign policy. And since then, we have just sent another 1,000 troops to Saudi Arabia because Iran has been incentivized to stir up more trouble. Explain to me how this is part of ending endless wars. Explain to me how this is part of any coherent foreign policy agenda. What is the strategy? What is the plan? Hey, didn't all of you people just say that Obama's irresponsible withdrawal from Iraq was the very reason for the emergence of ISIS? Where are all of you people now? What the hell happened? ISIS is still a thing, you know. And then this goes to the third principle, that the world and the interactions between nations is just a static object, and that removing the United States from Syria has no serious implications, and people and nations do not react to incentives. Okay, question time. Does anyone know why the Middle East has been the most contentious region in the world for like ever? Does anyone know what the Persian civilization is? Islam. Geographic advantage. From where do you think the migrant crisis came from? Where do you think these migrants traveled to afterwards? What impact do you think the migrants had on the locations they migrated to? Why do you think Europe and America have seen the growth of nationalist and populist movements all over the place? What do you think was one of the major causes of that? Who do you think we trade with? Who do you think we rely on stable economic relationships with? Why do you think America has resettled thousands of migrants in our own country? Why do you think nearly half of the world's refugee population comes from the Middle East? In what ways do you think this costs nations of the world? Why do you think Russia is interested in the Middle East? Why do you think China has defended the Assad regime? Why does it seem like all of our major adversaries support the most brutal dictators in the Middle East? There are now over 130,000 displaced Kurds in the world according to the UN. Where do you think they're going to go? What do you think was the only major force in the world that prevented the very existence of 130,000 newly displaced peoples? The Kurds were holding over 10,000 ISIS fighters in prison. The only reason they were able to manage that was because we were there to protect them from the Turks. Now, we have footage of ISIS fighters escaping from prisons. Where do you think they're going to go? Who do you think they want to kill? Do you know that ISIS infiltrates refugee camps and recruits more members that way?
Kurdish forces, already stretched too thin, warned us they'd struggle to contain ISIS detainees if Turkey attacked. The militant group has already taken advantage of the power vacuum, detonating a massive car bomb in the city of Qamishli, where we'd been covering the aftermath of a Turkish military attack. That was only a couple of blocks from where we were. We've pulled back from there. But it just gives you an idea that for civilians, you never know where the next attack is going to come from. A random Turkish mortar took the leg of 7-year-old Sarah and the life of her 11-year-old brother. She covered her ears, not wanting to be reminded of the horrors, as her mother told us what happened. Now, while we were at that hospital, somebody asked me where I came from. When I said America, that would normally elicit a warm response. But now many people blame America for what's happening here. They say U.S. military support was the only thing stopping this Turkish onslaught. And now that's gone.
And this unbelievable response from Trump.
Steve?
ISIS fighters escape and pose a threat elsewhere.
Well, they're going to be escaping to Europe. That's where they want to go. They want to go back to their homes, but Europe didn't want them from us. We could have given it to them. They could have had trials. They could have done whatever they wanted. But as usual, it's not reciprocal. You know my favorite word, reciprocal. That's all I want. I don't want an edge. I just want reciprocal. And it's not reciprocal, Steve. It's not a fair deal for the United States.
And ISIS escaping to Europe doesn't affect us how? Explain how terrorists escaping to Europe will not, and has not in the past, affected Europe. Explain how this has no consequences to America. And hey, if you still think that the withdrawal is going to stop endless wars and stop dead soldiers, what do you think our relocated soldiers are going to be doing in Iraq? From CBS News, quote, most of the troops President Trump boasted about bringing home from the endless war in Syria are actually just crossing the border into Iraq, where they will be positioned to keep helping in the fight against ISIS if needed. Now more of our soldiers are going to be on the front lines killing ISIS, because we are not leaving the Middle East, because there is no strategy here. Also, we will now be sending, quote, tanks and other heavy military hardware back to Syria to protect their oil fields from ISIS. It's almost like we shouldn't have withdrawn. It's almost like leaving and then realizing that we actually have national security interests and going back wasn't a very good strategy, if you can call it one. It's almost as if the people who precisely predicted that this withdrawal is just going to mean more American troops and materials are going to have to go back into the Middle East were right, because they know what the hell they are talking about. Honestly, it's like people do not believe that events that occur throughout the world have any impact on us at all. As if we were just totally removed from anything that goes on. Anyone still proclaiming, that this was all in the name of ending endless wars, that the troops are coming home, does not know a damn thing about foreign policy or what actually happened over the last few weeks. And please explain this one to me. If we no longer care about the Middle East, and Syria in particular, if we no longer care about any of that because, endless wars, then why in the world was Trump threatening to destroy the Turkish economy? I thought we don't care anymore. I thought we were tired of endless wars. I thought we wanted to revert back to the good old days where we just say, oh yeah, these nations have always wanted to kill each other. Just let them. I thought we just moved our troops out of Syria because, as our president says, he's tired of endless wars and he's trying to stop all future endless wars. So why are we attempting to sanction Turkey for doing something that we just greenlit? Someone explain how any of this makes for good foreign policy. The mindless chance of just ending endless wars is foreign policy for ignoramuses. They can't possibly know anything about our national security. They can't possibly know about how Donald Trump went about doing any of this. And this principle of, ending endless wars, this isn't prudently ending wars. This isn't ending wars with a serious strategy. It's just, hey, let's get out immediately. Screw the consequences. And that's why so many people cheered this response. Because there's no other principle than just getting out. When Donald Trump says he is, quote, bringing the troops home, he is lying to you. Wishful thinking that matters of global security can just be solved with our thoughtless withdrawal is going to lead to some harsh realities. I do not like the fact that we were involved in Syria at all to begin with. Barack Obama made an incredibly dumb mistake getting us involved in the region with absolutely no strategy. Our government should not be involved in foreign wars that are not approved by Congress. But once you are there, once you are on the ground, once your presence has altered the course of action for every player in the region, once you've established networks of communication and alliances, you have certain responsibilities. And if you want to leave, I have no problem with that. But you need to actually have a strategy for doing that. Barack Obama had no strategy for trying to leave Iraq and helped to create this mess with ISIS to begin with, which is exactly what Trump railed on during his 2016 campaign. Donald Trump, as far as we know, did not consult with anyone before doing this. He did not coordinate his actions with any nation. Every single one of his national security advisors was stunned by this decision. Trump literally owns all of this on his own because he had absolutely no plan. He has no idea what the hell he is doing. He does not know anything about foreign policy. And seriously, what was the gain for us in all of this? We lost an alliance, our troops are still in the Middle East, they're not coming back home, we've seen the beginning of an ethnic cleansing in northern Syria, Russia and Assad just became more powerful in the Middle East, the Kurds have been made to cede almost all of their land, our soldiers will now be more directly involved in combating ISIS, we're going to be sending tanks and hardware back to Syria to defend them from ISIS, which I thought we just destroyed according to our president, I guess not. How in the world has any of this been good for us? How in the world are we better off now than we were in the beginning of October? This is what happened. We capitulated to Erdogan for legitimately no good reason by the pure irrational impulse of Donald Trump and moved our troops out of the way so Erdogan could bomb the shit out of the Kurds and unleash his militias. That is literally what happened. There are now hundreds of dead people in the world, tens of thousands of displaced peoples, all because we moved a couple of hundred soldiers for no good reason, and who were extremely cost effective, by the way, for what they were doing, because the Kurds were on the front lines. For all intents and purposes, we were allied with the Kurds. Our special forces have worked with them to kill ISIS units. 11,000 of them have died killing terrorists for us, and we have not left the Middle East, so now we will be more directly involved in killing terrorists without our ally in the region. Well done, everyone. Okay, so that's my Kurds rant. It is incredible how many times people keep falling into the trap that what Donald Trump does is just a brilliant stroke of genius, when it is an incoherent, capricious mess with no planning. So many people kept messaging me, well, no one ever said getting out would be easy. Like, what kind of cheap justification is that? and then the fabulous turn to virtue signaling from some people. Well, if you love the Kurds so much, then why don't you go and fight for them? Yeah, Pretentious virtue signaling and middle school retorts are now substitutes for actual foreign policy solutions.
Well, if you love reason so much, then why don't you just marry Socrates?
I'm so tired of these excuses. I mean, this is why I hate talking about current politics. But, in other news, we got al-Baghdadi. That dog that Trump showed a picture of, that dog that, that supposedly hunted down al-Baghdadi, that is a very good dog. If Trump parades that dog around in every single one of his rallies from now until November 2020, he might just win all 50 states. But anyway, it is very good news that Baghdadi's dead, and because it is actually good news coming out of this administration, we get some utter stupidity from the Washington Post, who, in their obituary of al-Baghdadi, literally changed the headline from Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Islamic State's terrorist-in-chief, dies at 48, to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, austere religious scholar at helm of Islamic State, dies at 48.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Mr. Let's rape all the women and children gets to be heralded as an austere religious scholar? I think Stephen Hayward said that this phrase will enter the permanent lexicon of stupid political euphemisms. Yeah, what the hell? Also, dies at 48? I mean, I guess that's one way of saying blew himself up along with his 2 children. Along with this, there's been this other kind of theory where, because we were leaving Syria, now we decided to take out Baghdadi, as if it was a 100% assurance this whole time, and that we were staying around for no good reason, just letting this guy hang out in his house. I mean, this operation has been in planning for 5 months already. Gathering intel, and it was conducted with the help of the Kurds, because apparently they were the ones who got a blood sample of Baghdadi, and his they got a sample of his underwear, which we used to identify his presence in the area. And this whole crap with Turkey was responsible for delaying the operation by an entire month. According to one former Pentagon official, Dana Stroll, Trump rejected intelligence community assessments and spilled classified intelligence, cut off our military operations at its knees with unplanned decisions like Syria, repeatedly treated Iraq with indifference, and appeared ready to throw out the relationship with the SDF only a few weeks ago. Yet this operation relied on US intelligence, our military in Syria and Iraq, intelligence breakthroughs by the Iraqi government, and an intelligence network cultivated by the SDF at US request. So, yet again, our presence in Syria in cooperation with the SDF helped lead to the death of this jackass. This operation could not have happened without our ground forces in the area. And, if you recall the timeline here, Trump already said ISIS was dead months ago. So, isn't it kind of weird to now again say that ISIS is dead after its leader was killed? It's like, shouldn't you not make statements like that to begin with? Isn't any of this what everyone was railing Obama on for making stupid statements like, what was it, the ISIS is the JV team? Statesmanship is dead for all intents and purposes. And ISIS, regardless, ISIS is not dead. There are still thousands of fighters in the region. The death of Baghdadi will not stop them, just like bin Laden's death didn't stop Al-Qaeda. When Obama decided to leave Iraq, Baghdadi filled the gap. And so long as they exist and want to kill us over here, regardless of whether or not we are in the Middle East, we will be over there to prevent that from happening. You can say mission accomplished all you want, but the reality of the situation will not change. Withdrawing from anywhere with no plan, no communication, and pretentious notions that we are bringing world peace by ending endless wars is not an actual strategy. But anyway, it is fantastic news that Baghdadi is dead. And that was probably like the one good news cycle that Trump had for 24 hours this past month. And this is now the second month in a row where the latest news has taken up almost all of my podcast time. I don't even know how this takes up that much time. I mean, like, I keep talking and then I look at the clock and it's been 2 hours. But so now we'll move on into the question time. And this week, as always, questions are reserved to the patrons because they are fabulous people and they are paying customers. And this week we've got some long questions. So this will really be a deluxe size podcast. First question: do you foresee Warren clinching the nomination from failing Biden? And with the economy already headed towards recession, Warren beating Trump based on a Trump crashed the economy narrative. I say the economy is in recession simply because the numbers say it. Manufacturing is already in legit recession and everyone knows it. Maybe you'll disagree, but you'll be very wrong. Yes, manufacturing is slowing. It's just been in recession for about a couple months now, I think. I'm not in any position to be predicting economic downturns, but who knows? A recession could very well be coming. It's basically due. But I pretty much feel alone here in my belief that Joe Biden will be the nominee, and I get the criticism against him. He's weird. He's kind of boring. He doesn't necessarily have. He doesn't seem all that enthusiastic, but I just can't help but thinking that he's going to be in the lead. He still is in the lead. I think Bernie Sanders is not going to make it at all, and that his supporters will shift over to Warren or Biden, most likely Warren. But I mean, if the economy does happen to go into recession, every Democrat is going to use a Trump crash the economy line, which, I mean, the only way in which I could see that actually working is if a recession is directly tied to the Trump tariffs, and which, at least for the manufacturing and I forget where I read it from, but I have it saved in a folder. I read an article saying that once Trump enacted the tariffs, manufacturing industries were just going crazy because they were happy, and so they added way too much capacity to their production lines, which it's so bizarre because it's almost like, did these companies not have like an economic advisor? Read basic economics. Like, when you're there's really no good reason to have expanded capacity when tariffs are being imported or are being imposed on these kinds of products, because you cannot possibly guarantee the same amount of domestic demand on the products, especially when the prices go up. I mean, just what kind of thinking is going on here? But you all know what I feel about the tariffs, and there will actually be more tariff talk in the next official video. I haven't edited any of that yet, but it pops up somewhere within the 5 to 6 hour spectacle. But anyway, I'm still thinking that Biden will make it. I'm not bullish on him, but there's a lot of old Democrats out there. Old Democrats are generally more likely to be Biden voters, and that's kind of how I see it. And the only other person who, I don't think Pete Buttigieg will get the nomination, because a lot of black voters really don't like the idea of supporting a gay person. But if Buttigieg did get the nomination, I could see him getting a sizable amount of support from Democrats. And he would be interesting to see as president. But I've heard so much in the last couple of months now that the black Democratic constituency of the party really, it's really the more moderate base among the Democrats, because it's white progressives who are the most radical in the party. Black Democrats are still more likely to be religious. They're still more likely to not really support gay marriage. I mean, the radicals of the party are really white progressives. It's interesting how that's happened, because it really did used to be the other way around in the 20th century. Like, you have Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, Angela Davis, and like city, corrupt kind of city politics. But I mean, Republicans are so horrible at reaching out to black voters anyway that they're not likely to be supporting them at any time soon. But compared to Donald Trump's record, almost everything that all of the Democratic candidates are proposing are just outright unconstitutional. I mean, Kamala is running to be a queen monarch and, wants to jail people. Beto wants to take your AR-15 and AK-47 and, is literally every single Republican's talking point come to life. All of Elizabeth Warren's plans for taxation are absolutely unconstitutional and would never be passed. You cannot have a wealth tax in this country. And, how do you even... for a serious academic and lawyer, she really hasn't thought through any of this. How the hell do you tax wealth? How do you determine the value of a rich person's art painting? How do you determine the wealth of subjectively valued items? And Europe tried this. They had tried and they had to get rid of their wealth taxes because there was just no way to make it work. It was just a mess. And she is basically offering a version of the Affordable Care Act, which will make us trillions of dollars deeper in debt. As if we don't already have enough debt. I think the Trump administration is now the number one administration to increase the national debt. What the hell happened to fiscal? What the hell happened to fiscal conservatism? None of these candidates are really all that serious. Andrew Yang probably comes closest with some of his solutions, but I don't agree with him on any of his major issues. There absolutely should not be a UBI, and especially, one, we did that already. It was called the negative income tax, and it didn't work out so well. And it didn't really help all that much to keep families together. But even Yang's plan, it doesn't get rid of everything else. It's just an addition of a UBI on top of all other welfare programs. If all we had for welfare was a UBI and everything else, all of our Social Security, Medicare, unemployment benefits, whatever, all that was gone, then I'd be down for a UBI if that was the trade-off, But that's not what's happening, and that's not even something that's been discussed. There are no requirements, as far as I know, attached to the UBI. There are no incentives for people to get involved in their communities or do things with themselves. Yang seems decent. He seems like a decent guy, but I do not support any of his policies, or his major policies at least, because he's got hundreds of issues or something on his website. The Democratic candidates all suck. I will likely not vote for anyone in 2020 at this point. Next question. Oh, super long. As both factions of our political system are evenly competing for who gets power over the entirety of the US, do you think that a significant, rapid shift towards state governments and away from the federal government could alleviate some of the tensions between the left and the right that we face today? There are still a lot of controversial issues that have gone unresolved since I was a teenager, and with states having their own treasuries, governors, and divisions of taxation, I don't see why these issues should be on the federal level to begin with. Abortion, environmental regulation, welfare, cost of college, universal healthcare, etc. Unlike the EU, the US system is capable of creating a higher resolution of power since the federal government itself was optimized to serve as a glue for the independent states. Instead, a potential to localize power is wasted on voters selecting candidates to fight in the arena in Washington on policies which half the country is guaranteed to disagree with, instead of just implementing those policies within their own states. If California wants to give free healthcare to illegal immigrants with their own state budget, just let them. We have open borders between states. I can always leave if I don't like what my state does. Enacting /reacting to new policies would be much easier on the state and local levels than it would be to organize nationwide movements in support. Plus, if you dislike the president, you can have some security knowing that at least state officials will have your interests in mind. What are your thoughts? P.S. Have you heard of the Constitution Party? Is that the white supremacist one? I know that like it's either the America Party or the Constitution Party or something like that, you know, which is like a white nationalist or nativist thing. I don't really pay attention to third parties. I don't know what the Constitution Party is all about. I just know that one of them, something has like one of the parties out there has a really, you know, America sounding name, but it's actually something that you want to stay away from. But you know, I would answer yes to your question, but I would go even further than just state government, and I would say local governments, and like just like your own local neighborhood and community, because it's not just the government where you should be looking to solve your problems. It should be your local community, your neighbors, your local institutions. But you mentioned abortion as one of your examples of a state issue. So Roe v. Wade should be overturned, and while it is a better option to have the states deal with abortion, I think that the issue will ultimately have to be something that the national government rules on, because abortion gets to the very question of what it means to be a human being, and questions of that nature go to the federal government. Slavery got to the nature of what it meant to be a human. Jim Crow laws and discrimination and, you know, sexual discrimination and suffrage and all got to the issue of what it means to be human. So it had to go to the federal government. So if we're stacking up the abortion issue, like for like what is best or trade-off, taking the issue to the states is better than Roe v. Wade as it is right now. But the federal government ultimately passing an amendment or something to outlaw abortion is my personal highest ideal. Just because, I mean, it really does kind of become a parallel to slavery, the slavery situation. You know, we had certain states ban slavery and some states had slavery. So, you know, what exactly does it mean when you cross the border? Or when a slave crossed the border, you know, does he suddenly become a free man? You know, that's the whole problem here. And with abortion, it's like, you have, when you cross the border into like Texas or something, you know, is your fetus, you know, suddenly a human being, and then it goes back to California and then it's not? We're gonna get into some problems with that, because, you know, I mean, abortion kills the most innocent human being that you can possibly conceive of, and the entire practice of abortion just really throws into the garbage the entire basis of the Constitution, that you have a right to life, liberty, and property. It's pretty hard to enjoy that right to life when you're killed in the womb and have absolutely no say in being killed. And as time goes on and the science with regards to life just continues to become clearer and clearer, and also one of the more hopeful developments of this century is that the number of abortions has been slowly decreasing, and I hope that is because more people are recognizing a baby, for a human being, for what it is. That's probably one of the best trends of the 21st century, is that fewer people are killing their babies. But it does throw John Rawls's I think theory of justice, or theory of something relating to justice. You know, his whole question was, if you were to be born in any society, what kind of society would you want to be born into? And, you know, most people say, a society where everyone's equal. We'll have equal rights, individual rights. You know, economic liberty. Basically the American creed. But it's kind of hard to be born it's hard to be born into the ideal society when you are killed before you're able to do that. So yeah. Next question. All right, last question. In the last video, you said that you only have a MacBook Air when you're at college. So you're telling me you have been editing multiple hour-long videos on a laptop which is made by Apple? Don't you know that Apple is for profit and against humanity? Yeah, that was actually, I forget which video it was. So when I go to college, you know, I have a MacBook Air with only it only had 128 gigabytes. And if you're freshman year when I went to college, I had a MacBook Air with only 128 gigabytes. And when you're a video editor, you know that is just not enough storage space to be making videos on, especially with the length that I am. So I forget which one of the early videos it was, but I was in the middle of making it while still living in the dorms, and I just could not continue making it because I had no more storage space. And the only reason why that video, maybe it was the trickle down video or something, but the only reason why that video was able to finish was because the school year ended, and then I went back home to where my desktop iMac is, and then I finished the video on my iMac, which has a terabyte of worth of space on it. And because by that point I knew that there was no way I could make any more videos on a MacBook Air with only 120 gigabytes, I traded that in and got the same exact MacBook Air, but it just had 500 gigabytes. That, if I did not have that much space, Crazier for Kavanaugh would not have come out until June. And yeah, during the school year, I've been editing on my MacBook Air, but when I'm at home, I switched to the iMac because it's just so much easier and that way. Because when I made Crazier for Kavanaugh video, when I was making it, I was really scared that the laptop would just not be able to handle exporting all 3 hours of the video. And because, and yes, I get it, right? Macs suck. I've heard the arguments. I agree. It's too convenient for what I need to do. But I get really worried when my laptop gets hot, especially in the upper left corner where when you're pushing the computer too hard, or the Mac laptops kind of suck sometimes because even if I'm just using Google Chrome, the computer starts to just burn up. But the computer gets so hot sometimes. I mean, you could burn yourself if you kept your fingers on the aluminum for too long. But I was so worried that because I had to export the video and it was going to take 10 hours to export the video, that the computer might just blow up in the middle of the night or something while I was sleeping, because that's the only time that I could export it. So I was just really scared that there wouldn't be a video at all because it would just be too much for the computer to handle. But I woke up the next day and then it ended up being okay. Oh yeah, and because the laptop just really can't handle anything, I had to edit the video in, I think I edited it in 20-minute chunks, and then I exported the chunks, and then at the end of, after I had everything ready to go, I just put all the 10 or so chunks together and then exported it as the 3-hour video, which I had no intention of making that in parts just because that was an impromptu video. I just, it'll be like a historical artifact, but I have no intention of putting that in parts. So yeah, it wasn't easy doing that, and editing like a minute of video, even with what I do, I just draw it's just like 1080p drawings and like some text on a screen and some poorly rendered video clips occasionally, and already my laptop is just burning. So that kind of is, it ain't easy doing what I do. And actually the Patreon supporters screen that you see at the end of every video, that page, just making it, I mean, I put all of those little icons individually next to the names. Like, I don't have there's no script that automatically puts these things together or anything. I manually scale down the juice bottles and the juice jugs and I put them next to the names. But all of those little icons, it's just, for some reason, way too much for the computer to handle. So every time I get a new patron, I have to hurry and put the name in the computer so it doesn't get hot and start making a bunch of noise. Yeah, that's... One time I was in a class where we were really not doing anything. So I just opened Final Cut Pro and then I started editing, but I realized that, you know, the basic stuff that I was doing was already too much for the computer to handle, that it started to make, you know, the fan started to go crazy, or whatever fan is inside the laptop, and it started making a lot of noise in the classroom. So I just, oh god, let me shut off this. I can't edit on this laptop in class. It just makes too much noise. So yeah, that's that question. There was a fourth question from a guy named Butt Pepsi, but I don't know if he deleted it or something because it no longer exists. It's in my email notification, so Butt Pepsi, if you want to ask that question again, because I don't know if you changed your mind and deleted it or what, make sure you put it in the podcast question section of the Patreon post for the next podcast. But that'll do it for this episode of the Juice Box. I'm still hoping to get the video out by late December. It still might not be until early January. We'll see. You people know what I'll be doing for the next couple of weeks, so I'm going to get back to that. Hopefully I don't have to talk about Ukraine again next month, or if I do, that it's just really short, because I'm tired of it already. And until next time, have a great Thanksgiving. And this has been the Juice Box. Thanks for listening.